Okay, so 3-pin charging cables. So firstly, a massive thank you to all my members, people who've joined the channel. We've been having some member-only chats and interacting on member videos and things like that. So thank you if you've joined the channel. So 3-pin charging leads. I say charging leads because they are charging leads, charging connectors, but they are not chargers. What these do is switch on the mains and also do some comms with the car. So what's inside one of these, first of all? Not a lot is the answer, really. So there's obviously some power in. This one has an additional connector there. That'll be for a temperature sensor in this plug, which is quite cool. So that's connected there. So if it gets warm, if the plug gets warm, it will switch off, which is quite cool. This one's broken, so don't worry about the fact that there's no fuse cover. So the power comes in. There's comms here and some relays, and the power goes out basically, and that's all it is. There's a circuit board under here, but it's kind of potted in rubbery stuff, but there's not a lot in these ones. Basically this one's faulty, but you can't even get to the circuit board, so there's not a lot that can be done there. So this is the one I use in the workshop just for testing cars and things like that. No sort of massive charging, but if you leave these things plugged in overnight, you can have issues where the plugs overheat and melt the pins and things like that. And the reason for that is that UK plugs and sockets are designed for 13 amps max, but not continuously, and it will cause an issue if you're drawing 13 amps continuous from the plug. So if we have a look on the back of here, so we can see input there, we've got the voltage, frequency, 13 amps input, but output 10 amps. And 10 amps is the maximum safe continuous level you want to go to. Depending on how confident you are on the wiring of where you're plugging it into, you may actually want to go lower. This one doesn't have any adjustment, and I've got a good quality socket that I plug it into, and I don't leave it overnight anyway, to be honest. Now here is an older one. Obviously we can see straight away maximum current 13 amps. If we have a look on the back of here, we can see input 13 amps, output 13 amps. So this is not safe for long use overnight. Fortunately, it came from a car with quite a small battery. A Mitsubishi i-MiEV has about 12 kilowatt hours usable, and so after a few hours it's going to be full, and actually if the car's flat it stops mid-charge and balances. So that's kind of why that worked, even though it's kind of unsafe. The car didn't have a very big battery. If we plug that into, it'll be like a slightly later Nissan Leaf with a bigger battery. This plug is going to get seriously warm and potentially melt. This is actually a warning label. There was a recall to add warnings onto these leads, so that's why the big things there. But yeah, 10 amps is the maximum you can safely draw out of these. So we know these are 13 amp plugs, 13 amp sockets, 13 amp fuses, but at 13 amps the fuse will get really hot, especially after several hours, and that's why it's not safe. Even at 10 amps it will get quite warm, and depending on the quality of your socket, the connectors, sort of as the plug goes in and the pins kind of grab the outside of here, depending on the quality of that connection, you can get them to be quite hot even at 10 amps. So it's always a good idea to sort of touch the plug after a couple of hours, make sure it's safe. So that's not safe. 13 amps is bad. Interestingly, this one is actually adjustable speed, so you can move it up and down. I suspect that is so that the company can have a common design across Europe. So in Europe they have the round Schuko plugs, and they are 16 amps max, but they can run 13 amps continuous. So this is adjustable up and down, which is kind of nice. This charger actually works, but the comms on it's really slow, and some cars basically give up waiting for the comms. So like, it won't work on a Zoe, but it will work on sort of Mercedes and BMW cars, things like that. It's adjustable, which is nice, although it doesn't actually tell you how many amps. If we have a look on the back, it actually says 10 amps there, so it may have been locked down, but this is likely a common design that they can produce, and then maybe they just update it. I've seen one of these where if you put it up to max it went to 13, then it was sort of like 10, 8, 6, something like that. Yeah, so basically just have a look at what you've got, make sure it's 10 amps, feel the plug after a couple of hours, and yeah, make sure you're not using an old 13 amp one. This, you can't adjust it at all. It will just push 13 amps out unless you've got adjustment within the car. It's not very common, but some cars you can adjust the charge rate, which is nice. This is a fairly modern one. This is the kind of standard screw fix one, which are really good. This is a 10-meter one, and a nice big fat cable here as well, which is really good. But yeah, they are very useful, but can cause a few issues with the wiring. It's nice if they've got the temperature sensors in the socket, because that keeps them safe, in the plug I should say. And yeah, just stay safe really. Keep an eye on your chargers, especially if you're doing an overnight long charge. Avoid extension leads, because let's say this has got a temperature sensor in the plug, but if you plug that in an extension lead, obviously at the other end of the extension lead, the plug that goes into the house socket obviously doesn't have a temperature sensor. So there's potentially the issue there that that's getting warm, and this is going to have no idea, and it's going to continue drawing current. And obviously with an extension lead, you've just got an extra set of connections that can all potentially get warm. You can get high quality extension leads, but yeah, you've got to be very, very careful when you use those. So hopefully that's interesting. Let me know about quirks you've got with your charge cables. The one I had of these, which was adjustable, was really useful, because if you were sort of plugging it into a socket and you weren't sure, you could sort of turn it down to 10 amps, or turn it down to 8 amps, I should say, from 10 amps, and then just be like a little bit more confident about leaving it overnight. But yeah, stay safe, have a double check of your chargers. If you're at all concerned about anything, particularly when you're looking at the plug, just look around these bottom pins and just make sure that there's no sort of melting or discoloration or anything like that. Just check them occasionally. Sometimes they can work for a while and you don't realise they're overheating a little bit every night, and then when you do a particularly long overnight charge, then you can have an issue. So yeah, hope that's interesting, and let me know if you've got any quirks with your chargers. Interestingly, I know a guy who's got a Mercedes EQC, so a really modern car, and the charge cable for that actually runs 8 amps, so a little bit slower, and I suspect that might be a bit like this, where there's a European version 13 and a UK version, and they've gone for 8 just to make sure it's safe. And the vehicle manufacturers tend to consider these to be emergency chargers, so they would say that they're not designed for long-term charging, and I suspect that 8 amps is sort of along those lines. It will give you a bit of charge, but it's not really designed for continuous use. In terms of the useful power you'll get out of these, so your 10 amp one, which is kind of the standard now, so if you've got 240 volts, you're getting 2,400 watts, 2.4 kilowatts from this. There's always an efficiency loss, varies on cars, but let's call it 400 watts efficiency of keeping the car awake, running any water pumps or cooling or anything like that. And so you're getting about 2 kilowatts into the battery. So 2 kilowatts, if you're doing, let's say 3.5 miles per kilowatt hour, so in 2 hours, you're going to get about 7 miles of charge. So not a vast amount. But yeah, if you're putting on for 4 hours, 28 miles, it's yeah, roughly about the quarter of speed of a sort of properly fitted 7 kilowatt home charger. So I hope that's interesting. And any comments, let me know. Cheers.